forecast on Magic 104.1 KMGL. And now, Flashpoint, with moderator Devin Scillian, along with Burns Hargis and Mike Turpen.
Hi, and welcome to Flashpoint. It's been said that given the relative weakness of the governor's office in our state, the real influence that a governor has is made manifest in his or her appointments. Those appointees then turn and make the decisions that affect all of us. And thus, the confirmation process of appointees has become more of a barbecue these days. Mike and Burns, in Washington, we've seen that it's been the Surgeon General who's been having problems here, and they're laying the sauce in this state on the Education Secretary nominee.
Yeah, this all really began, I think, back with John Tower, when they went after John Tower with a vengeance, and then it continued on with the nomination of Bork to the Supreme Court, which actually created a verb in our vernacular, which is you've been borked. And the next one to be borked was Clarence Thomas. Henry Foster is getting borked, and I kind of like it, but it's going on right here in Oklahoma.
But nobody seems to slide through easily, and the opponents of whoever happens to be in power, whether it's the White House or the governor's mansion, seem to want to use these appointments as a reflection of the person who made them rather than really looking at whether or not that person is necessarily up for the job.
Oh, I think that's true to a certain extent. And I do believe, as a matter of fact, as we've said often on this show, that in this country we like to create our kings and then we immediately try to destroy them. I think even for the appointees, there's something to be said for the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire, and you should put them through a lot. But the scrutiny we put these people through at times is a little bit ridiculous.
Well, but what seems to activate this aggravation is the challenge to some vested interest, some strong vested interest, or some very divisive issue in our country, when you think about it. And if they perceive, these people perceive that the nominee is going to really challenge the status quo, that seems to create the cauldron that excites us.
Or if they're not qualified. That seems to stir people up as well.
And the two big appointments right now that are making news in Oklahoma involve people who were appointed after losing an election. Charles Nesbitt ran for Corporation Commission and then was appointed.
Idea.
Well, see, it's a bad idea on your side. And then Linda Murphy ran for the education post and then was appointed to the Education Secretary's post, and people didn't like that either. In the old days, wouldn't it have made sense if somebody had run and done fairly well in the election? Well, then we'll go ahead and appoint them somewhere else. Today, that doesn't make sense for some reason.
Well, you got to understand the job that Linda Murphy has been nominated for has a scope of responsibility much broader than the office she ran for. She ran for state school superintendent, but she covers VOTEC, she covers higher ed, and all other forms of education in the state.
So she agrees with Frank Keating that we should declare a war on public education from the kindergarten to the PhD level and cut that higher education budget and close down colleges and universities across the state. Is that right?
I guess we'll find out.
We will indeed.
Okay, maybe that's my first question.
Because when we come back on Flashpoint, our guest today is Linda Murphy, Governor Keating's appointee to the Education Secretary's post. That's when we continue. Stay with us.
Of broadcasters.
All right, welcome back to Flashpoint. I'm Devin Scillian, along with Mike Turpen and Burns Hargis. Our guest is Linda Murphy. Good to have you with us.
Hi, glad to be here.
Now, you ran for superintendent of schools in Oklahoma and ran a very strong race, but was defeated by Sandy Garrett. And now back in the picture again. And Burns, you wanted to start things out.
Well, with everything that's been going on and said about you, Linda, I fully expect you to show up with horns and a pitchfork. What have you done to aggravate people in the OEA and in the education, common education establishment at least? What have you done to make these people so mad and fear you so much?
Well, obviously, I've challenged the system. Perception and reality are different.
Mike, I know you've been, in fact, you tried to start the questioning in the last segment before she even got here, so go right ahead.
Did I really? Yeah. Recently, the Tulsa World, tough editorial. Governor Frank Keating's appointment of Linda Murphy as Secretary of Education indicates the new governor has little regard for the state's educational system. Points out that you've homeschooled your children or one of your children, and then it says Keating, a product of private schools, who sends his children to private schools, has been out of Oklahoma for a decade or more, has not kept up on education issues, and his appointment of Linda Murphy.
You know, you can't read. He starts to fade out. Well, what's
your Secretary of Education with little to qualify her as Secretary of Education, except an abiding disapproval of the public school system. That's what I was trying to find in here, folks.
I didn't expect endorsement from the Tulsa World, first of all.
Well, they endorsed Frank Keating, but they're mad at him about this deal. Do you have, this is my question, it's a hard one.
Yeah.
Do you really have an abiding disapproval of the public school system?
Obviously not. I wouldn't be wanting to work in it and help improve it.
Why did you homeschool your own children?
I homeschooled for 1 year during the campaign. I have a son that I felt didn't need the political pressure that we had in that little community, and that's 1 year out of 17 years of public schooling.
How do you
between two
homeschool?
children.
How do you homeschool your son if you're out traveling thousands of miles on the campaign trail?
When it got real busy, I put him back in after the primary, and he's done very well, so I didn't damage him. He's doing real good.
I got friends that are homeschoolers. I really do, and I mean that respectfully. But I have questioned whether a homeschooler, that concept, that philosophy, is appropriate, is a good qualification for Secretary of Public Education, or for people to even be on a public school board. Do most of your homeschooler friends have an abiding respect for public education?
Oh, I'm sure they do.
Do they?
You know, I think, though, the point is that homeschooling does not make you an enemy of public ed. And my background does not just include 1 year of homeschooling. So,
What do you intend to accomplish, at least on the Common Ed side, and we can turn to the other areas later? What is it as Secretary of Education that you hope to accomplish, and what changes should we expect you to try to make?
well, as far as Common Ed is concerned, I'm really interested in first seeing a lot more focus on reading. We need students to be able to read and read well when they get to the third grade.
You can help Mike here, too.
I think that when we look at the remedial cost on the college level, it shows us very well $21 million being spent to teach freshmen the English and math skills they need to start. And these are not dropouts. These are people who have a degree.
Now, I assume you did run into Sandy Garrett on more than one occasion during the campaign. What kind of, and this may be certainly a confusion to me and I'm sure to many, what kind of roles does, or meshing does there have to be between the position for which you're appointed and the position which Sandy Garrett was elected to? How much contact would you come into each other? Does it matter if you're on the same page or not?
Yes, we need to work together, and we're doing that. We have meetings with the Oversight Board. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Oversight Office, Office of Accountability, and the Oversight Board meets monthly, so we had a meeting this morning. We communicate about issues that involve, you know, our common duties.
Well, people would wonder how the two of you would get along, perhaps, because just by the nature of campaigns, we expected that there were adversarial roles back when you were running. Do you and Sandy Garrett see pretty much eye to eye? Are there things that you have vast differences on?
Well, I think obviously right after the campaign, Sandy Garrett held a press conference which showed that there's a lot of agreement toward changing some of the things that were brought in for reform. We're going in a better direction as far as the people of the state are concerned, and that's my interest, that we go in a more academic direction, that we not have some reform models out there that are too questionable or unresearched.
Were you supportive of 1017?
I did not campaign for it. I was not politically active at the time.
So did you vote for or against the Education Improvement Act 1017?
You mean
No.
the repeal, the proposed repeal?
No. Did you? That's right. Thank you, Burns.
That's all right.
Did you vote for the repeal of the Education Improvement Act 1017?
Yes, I did vote against it, but that was just my own decision, basically, and I answered this question yesterday for Senator Hobson when he asked.
Well, that's a good question then.
A very thick document I checked out from the library, read through the thing, and I really didn't understand what it was going to do. It's very complex, and I didn't feel that
You vote against the repeal of 1017?
I voted against 1017 for the repeal.
You did?
Uh-huh.
So you didn't think 1017 was a good idea?
What I just said is true. What I said is I read through the document. It was too complex. There was not a clear direction of what would be done. We were spending millions of dollars.
Wait a minute. How can you be Secretary of Education if you don't even understand 1017?
How many people
That's the
did?
toughest question I'm going to ask you.
How many people did, Mike?
I think a lot of people did.
We've got a far different product than most
Henry
people
Bellman
expected.
did. He was a Republican governor, and he advocated it.
Well, you might ask him today.
We'll continue this in just a second. Got to take a quick commercial break. Hang on.
You're the guest.
Bites his lip, I see. We'll be back with more. Linda Murphy's our guest on Flashpoint. We'll continue in a second.
I deserve this.
Welcome back. We were talking with Governor Keating's choice for Education Secretary Linda Murphy, and Burns wanted to tackle three of the more infamous initials these days.
Indeed. Linda, Sandy Garrett, shortly after the campaign, came out with a coffin and a shovel and buried something called OBE, Outcome-Based Education, which of course has been a terribly controversial program, I gather originally designed by a fellow in Colorado. Can you tell us where you are on that and whether outcomes are important as a part of our educational system?
Well, outcomes are important, standards and goals. My concern and my interest is that we should have more clearly focused outcomes. As you probably know, the Oklahoma Historical Society and Heritage Foundation, I believe, are the two groups that have decided we need clearer and more focused Oklahoma history standards, and they've spoken out on the issue as well. So we need to look at this and just redefine it in a more clearly focused way in several subject areas. Originally, when the outcomes came out, it said that first graders will monitor their own reading progress, and I and most people had a problem with that. So, you know, I think we're in a process here. It looks like we're going in a good direction to work on these issues and have a better product.
As far as reading, you say, the rumor over there around Muskogee and Fort Gibson is that you advocated some censorship in the school library there at Fort Gibson, that you wanted, what, Hansel and Gretel out and Wizard of Oz out, that sort of thing. Any truth to any of that?
No, that is a rumor.
Okay, you didn't advocate
Not
any
true.
censorship in the school library?
No, not at all.
Is it true you ran about 60-40, losing to Sandy Garrett in your own district? Is that fair to say?
Well, that's
or you were
where
known the best, you ran
Not
the
where
worst?
I'm known the best. That part is not true. I lived there. I moved there 4 years ago, but where I am known the best, where I taught school, where I lived for several years, I won Democrat County, Caddo County. I was the only Republican that won that county, plus 4 others in southwestern Oklahoma. That's where I'm known.
Not Fort Gibson.
Off the top of the program, we mentioned a couple of people who've expressed displeasure with your selection as Education Secretary. One that we didn't mention, Wilma Mankiller came out in a very highly publicized, we should note, comment against you, not only from the Cherokee, but through a council of tribes. Where is the grain between you and the Native American community? And I know part of it had to do with the not allowing your child to participate in a Native American ceremony at school. Is it as simple as that?
Well, it was a simple situation. I wrote a note to the teacher on a scrap piece of paper. It wasn't a big deal. I didn't file it with anyone. I just gave it to the teacher. It should have gone in the trash and probably did. I don't know where the story got out of hand, but the situation was I asked her not to have him participate, but to allow him to observe the ceremony. I thought it was a religious ceremony that should be held as more sacred. You know, it's great to understand other people's culture, but to participate in their religious ceremony is different. And I have a lot of support letters I brought with me if you want to read through these later, but Katua Band of the Cherokee Indians, John Ross Chief, Cheyenne Arapaho Tribe, and another one from the Cherokee National Party, all stating they support my position that I am correct, etc. So evidently a lot of people don't agree with Wilma.
So that's a decision you'd make again?
Certainly.
Linda, our governor, your governor, our governor, keeps saying here recently that you shouldn't be proud of a cheap degree. I mean, I don't know exactly what he means by that, but do you think you got a cheap degree where at Southwestern? Did you go to Southwestern?
Yes, I did.
Do you feel like you got a cheap degree, or are you proud of your degree?
Well, I don't know at the time what the comparatives were, but right now we're 50th in the nation on tuition for students. And I have a daughter who's a junior in high school. She'll be in college in about another year and a half. I would love not to have to pay higher tuition, but we've got to be realistic about the money we have in this state.
So you do believe we should cut higher education by $15 million and raise the tuition rates? Fair enough?
The governor's asking higher ed to look at it closely. It looks like there should be some administrative costs there. I think in the Tulsa World today there was an article showing that about 14% is the administrative cost overall in the universities. Not all of them, but just overall. And most people agree that 10% is a good number or amount of administrative
Which
costs.
colleges and universities should we shut down in Oklahoma? The governor said there's too many colleges and universities. Will you in fact donate your alma mater as the first one to be shut down? Should we shut
Certainly
down?
not. Certainly
okay.
not.
We don't want to shut down Southwestern.
We're not naming anyone. We're not,
Why not?
Telling higher ed what to do. We want them to take a look at this, and the budget's not finished. It goes through a process.
Do you think we should shut down colleges and universities in the state of Oklahoma, as the governor does?
Well, I think higher ed needs to make that determination.
Well, no. The
No,
governor.
I don't have a list.
All right. Certainly not Southwestern. I don't blame you. I like Southwestern too.
You know, I think our viewers are curious with all of the controversy here, and presumably you'll be going through hearings on the confirmation of your appointment, of how you really believe or how you really feel about public education, whether you're a supporter of education, what it would look like, whether teachers ought to make more money, whether they ought to have larger teacher-student ratios or smaller. Can you give us kind of in a nutshell, your vision for public education?
Well, in a soundbite, a short one, I believe that we need some clear academic standards, like I said earlier, in Common Ed, when we're focusing in on these details of performance of students. And we've been doing that. We just need to revise some things and improve some things in this new process. When we do that, we're going to see an end product of performance in students on a higher level, more individual accomplishment, Those students being supplemented in the classroom with telecommunications. We have a lot of opportunity out there in that arena. I visited Rogers State College recently, and they have quite a program there for producing telecommunications in the classroom, and we need to encourage that, look at that, and free people up to do that.
And we don't want Joe Carter to be messing around with it up there at Rogers.
One area that doesn't get very much attention usually when talking about the whole education system is special education, which you did have some experience in. How do you feel the state does in special ed, and what are the changes we need to make there?
Well, we have some needs in special education that people are looking at, working on, and certainly the governor and I are concerned on. One is we have a passport literacy test for 8th graders, and a lot of teachers are concerned right now, as we are, that some of these students are going to have a very difficult time passing that, and yet we don't want to discourage them from continuing on and doing their best at their level. So we have to work out some of those details about the passport test. But I also don't want to leave out vocational education and higher ed. We have a wonderful system of education in the state of Oklahoma, and one thing that I said over the last year is that really in the state of Oklahoma and in the nation, we have not had a system that fails. We have a system that works. There are problems, but the idea that it's failed is not true. When we look at other countries, you know, we educate all of our students, and I think we just need to build it together.
Here's a U.S. News and World Report, and they talk about that promoting vision therapy as an antidote is erroneous and wasteful of time and money. And it says the American Academy of Ophthalmology and American Academy of Pediatrics also condemned this concept of vision therapy. It says here over the 10 of the last 15 years, roughly, you were in fact the director of vision therapy for Dr. Sam Oliphant. That's one of the more controversial things people bring up about your past, as far as your lack of qualifications for Secretary of Public Education, or education here in the state of Oklahoma. What did you do for 10 of the last 15 years with this Dr. Sam Oliphant that's got everybody upset with this controversial so-called therapy?
I haven't heard this approach yet, but I'll just give Dr. Oliphant a little ad right here. We had a very successful program, and I'm sure he still does. We had tremendous success with visual problems related to learning. Students, adults, and children did very well through the program, and there's going to be an ongoing debate probably in that with ophthalmology and optometry, but we could get several hundred thousand optometrists in here that would agree with me that it does work.
It might put you through a little therapy.
Yeah, the Tulsa world, they need to print it bigger.
Confirmation hearings yet to come over the next couple of weeks or so. We appreciate your taking the time to share your views with us this morning.
Thank you.
Back with more on Flashpoint here in just a minute. This, so much talk about Linda Murphy. Nice today to hear it from her own mouth.
Well, I think you can see that she doesn't have horns and a pitchfork and a pointed tail. I mean, she is, I think she's a concerned parent. She's had kids in the schools. She's been in the schools. She's done both, and I think it's going to be very interesting. The confirmation hearings are going to be before Ed Long, Senator Ed Long, whose district includes Garfield County, that, by the way, Linda Murphy carried about 60-40. But Frank Keating has said, Mike, he's going to go to the mat on this one. I mean, he's going to walk through the fire to get Linda Murphy, because she reflects his views about education.
Well, if that's true, Frank Keating needs to teach her all about 1017, because I do think she is a very nice lady, nice person. I don't want to be sexist about this, and I do respect her for coming on this show and letting me ask her some questions and going through the confirmation process. You pointed out earlier it's a tough deal, but Burns, she said she didn't understand 1017, and I think it's really important for anybody that cares about public education in the state of Oklahoma. At some point in her career, she needs to understand it. Before she says she's for it or against it. She said she's against it because she didn't understand it. Well, that's not good enough. You got to be for something.
I don't think we want to give a test to the legislature on all the intricacies of 1017. It was kind of refreshing, frankly, to have somebody admit that they checked it out, read it, and it didn't make sense, because I think a lot of legislation doesn't make sense. But by the way, speaking of that, of the school board, I want to talk a little bit about the school board.
Well, that's right. Speaking of public education, Frosty Turpen, my brother, lives in Owasso. He's an all-stater in Owasso. He's got his 2 beautiful daughters in school there.
He's a great guy, but get to the point.
Well, he just got elected school board.
Holy
my God, so he cares.
I thought your uncle had a saying about that.
My Uncle Ralph did say there's 3 things you should never do.
Your uncle was named Ralph?
His wife was named Mildred. And he said there's 3 things you should never do in life. He said never try to climb a fence that's leaning towards you, never try to kiss a girl that's leaning away from you, and never serve on school board.
Well, Frosty's violated all 3.
Probably done all 3.
Well, yeah.
It was a little bit of a tough week for Governor Keating. First off, found out that right now there doesn't look like there's enough support in the Senate for him to get his right-to-work plan moving along, at least not this week. Maybe a little later on. But he also found out that his support for the idea of parental choice for schools isn't going to fly this year.
Oh, yeah. You know, everything that challenges the status quo, that really does some fundamental and dramatic changes, revolutionary, as he said, welcome to the revolution, is going to get squelched here in the early going. But the public is going to have to rise up and say, we want this revolution and let's get after it. That's what finally happened in Congress, and it'll happen here.
I was in Muskogee yesterday, ran into Bob Locke, a guy that said he pulled you through college.
Yeah. He did, by the back of my neck.
Well, he said you graduated in the upper 90% of your class.
That's right.
Okay, honor student, yes, Your Honor, no, Your Honor. But headlines in Muskogee, where are we? Are we over here?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
It says, welcome Waterloo. This is a brand new plant. 80% the people turned out to give a tax break to Waterloo. Waterloo is the biggest manufacturer in the whole world of chests, tool chests for tools, if you will. Going to bring 500 jobs. Over there in Muskogee, they said TGIM, thank goodness it's Monday. The workers do. They got a good work ethic. The point I'm saying to you, this state's on a roll with the quality jobs bill, the saving quality jobs bill, right to work. No wonder the governor's having trouble with it. The state's on a roll, and they don't need right to work. Ask the folks in Muskogee.
There are a couple of other issues that are before the legislature. One is the elimination of the franchise tax on corporations, which would give us a big advantage over competing states like Texas. Unfortunately, that got squelched. But the alive is the first $25,000 on corporate income.
Well, I'll tell you something got squelched. They squelched the special prosecutor. Can you imagine if Bill Clinton tried to fire Kenneth Starr, the Watergate prosecutor? Can you imagine if David Walters would have tried to fire Bob Macy and Susan Loving? Frank Keating comes in and fires a special prosecutor simply because he's investigating Stampgate, which was uncovered by the Daily Oklahoman, I might add. The only thing they've ever done negative to a group of Republicans.
$1,200 worth of it. It's a silly deal, Mike. And the Bob Macy Democrat already looked at it and got rid of it.
I'm sure you guys are just about to agree on
crime
this.
bill.
However,
I want to talk about the crime bill.
We are all out of time.
He doesn't want to let us decide how to spend our money.
I knew
How do
they'd
you
find a
stop
way
an
to sneak it in
investigation
anyway.
that's
This
already
is
in
going to go
process?
on for a while, but
Why
we
don't
better
we
go
Frank
ahead and
Keating
say goodbye.
Frank
Thanks for being with us on
friends
Flashpoint. We'll see you again next time. Have a good week.
They didn't investigate